This episode of the Party Loaded podcast is proudly sponsored by Audible.com. Check out their awesome catalogue of audiobooks with over 180,000 titles to choose from. And be sure to grab a free audiobook on us and support the show by visiting audibletrial.com/endgame.
Let's party.
Hello.
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 Hello. And welcome, one and all, to the Party Loaded podcast for Wednesday night, the 8th of August. This is, of course, is your weekly hit of everything great in the world of video games, of which there is a ton this week, and a ton of voices, as it turns out. A hell of a lot of voices, as it turns out. We have some extra people here. So anyone who listened to our show last week may be aware that we have got some goings on. So I'll kick off by introducing myself. I'm one of your hosts, Luke Ritaliak, partying up tonight with the lovable Jam, who you may know from previous episodes of the show from day dot. Hello. Jam. What's going on? Hello.
That was bad and we should
Christian.
feel bad.
Yes,
Christian,
I'm
hello.
good. Hello, thank you.
You're good? All right. So we have a bit of an introduction to make, and we were a little fast and loose with the wording last week because, as it happens, we don't have one new host we want to introduce tonight. We have two. We decided we wanted to swell the ranks somewhat and bring some fantastic new talent onto the team. And as it happens, both of these gentlemen are people who listeners of the show may already know if you've listened for a little while. So I'm going to kick off tonight by introducing probably our most recent one of the two, appearing just a few episodes ago to discuss all things people who are hard of hearing on the show. Had a fantastic chat. I'd like to welcome back Adrian Chia. Welcome, Adrian.
Hello, thank you.
Welcome to the party.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's great to be here.
Hooray.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm very keen to get stuck in and share some of my gaming knowledge of whatever you could claim that to be. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
excited to be on board.
No, it's good. Well, I mean, we did talk about a whole bunch of sort of fairly specific stuff last time, but we'll be able to dig into a bit more of the general what the heck is sort of Adrian when it comes to gaming and what kind of stuff are you into
Sure.
tonight. So that'll
Yep.
be fun. But we also want to do that with our other new host, and I would like to formally welcome back to the show. This will actually technically be his fourth appearance, if I've got my numbers correct. Matt, Game Dad Diet, welcome back for the permanent
Hello.
stay. How you doing?
Yay.
Thank you for having me on.
You can never leave.
Yeah.
I can never leave now.
No, that's it. Jam, Christian, lock the door.
Matt, what have we gotten ourselves into?
I know.
That's it. No, so I mean, long story short, we kind of decided it was time to start changing things up again. Super excited to have both the guys sort of joining us ongoing. Now we should probably mention that 5 is probably unprecedented for us because I think we've had maybe one episode ever where we've had 5 people on, and we probably have 5 on quite a bit in the future. But it might actually sort of be a semi-rotating cast on certain weeks as well. So if, we have weeks where there's 4 of us on, or we have a guest on and a couple of people change out. This is kind of just the rotating roster in a permanent way, more or less. So you can expect the 5 of us in some shape or form to be on regularly. And whatever shape that takes every given week, we will wait and see. So it's going to be a fun ride. Absolutely. We obviously have a ton of stuff to get through tonight, and we thought it would be a good opportunity to sort of spend the bulk of our show to dig in a little bit more into a couple of topics that are near and dear to Adrian and Matt's hearts, to kind of give a bit more information about what these guys like. But before we do, let's actually talk about what we've been playing lately, as we usually do. So, Matt, I want to throw to you tonight, and I think this is almost picking up where we left off the last time you were on, because the last time we talked about what games you'd been playing, you were mucking around with the Jurassic World Evolution, and we're still on dinosaurs,
Yes.
aren't we?
Yeah, still on dinosaurs at the moment. I've
going
been
on?
playing Ark Survival Evolved with a group of friends. We set up a private server thing. The group of us got together, and it's just kind of exploded. Now it's got like 10 or 15 people that are hanging out on the server.
Excellent.
A whole bunch of
Wow.
different tribes that have gotten built up on various locations on the island and everything. It's been really hilarious. I've got some really funny stories. We went into a cave today with some friends. I had a shotgun out. Was basically in the front of the group, making sure everybody was protected. One of my friends went and ran in front of me, and I shot their pants off.
Yes.
I was about to say, you combine the words shotgun and cave together, it can only end in hilarity.
Oh, no. So the Ark map, I'm actually curious, given that you've got that many people on, how big is the world map sort of turn out to be? Is there anything you can compare it to?
I would say, like... So it's interesting because there's flying mounts, and that obviously makes the map feel much, much smaller than it actually is. But when you're on foot, it feels sprawling. I'm not actually sure about the total scale, but I would not be surprised if it was fairly similar in scale to the Grand Theft Auto map, the most recent one.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty big. And it's like a whole bunch of different maps. They're all around the same size. So we're playing on the original OG map at the moment. And it's really nice. It's like this temperate map. It has some frosty, cold zones that my partner and I live in at the moment. Other people are on little dotted islands and living on the coast and in the jungle. There's a redwoods biome. It's really nice. It's not randomly generated, but there's just a huge area to go and explore. So.
And there's a ton of underground sort of sections as well,
yes,
isn't
there's
there?
a whole bunch of caves and everything that have hidden artifacts that kind of hint at what the Ark is that you're living on. So, yeah.
Nice. And shotgun waves and all
Yes,
sorts of
yeah. When we were in there, when we were exploring, the other kind of funny thing was the fact that we were crawling around in here and we were expecting there to be a whole bunch of gigantic spiders and snakes and everything because it's a cave. And nothing seemed to be around. And then it seemed like they must have spawned incorrectly and literally started pouring out of the walls on top of us. It was
like a nightmare.
It was terrible. It was terrifying. But we got through there. It was actually a very fun little time. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I was fascinated when we were talking about Ark about a week or so ago about the whole breeding shenanigans that you were
Yes.
describing. Because I had a suspicion that there was some sort of, dinosaur, I guess, creation tools in the game, but I had no idea it was as involved as what you described. So is there like a top tier dinosaur you can kind of aspire to breed? Is like what is the Indominus Rex of the game? Essentially, is there something that's peak level?
It's called a tank.
There are dinosaurs. So one of the things that the Ark team did, so there was this whole idea of alpha tribes, just massive tribes that would be on public servers that would bully everyone else. And so the team went and introduced new dinos that were specifically for the purposes of wiping out alpha tribes.
Oh, God.
And so the whole thing that they could do was like, there'd be these gigantic dinosaurs that could actually crush stone buildings and structures that are some of the strongest you can make. Yes, they've got, like, I think it's like the Giga Rex, like it's just a gigantic thing, but we don't have those spawning on our server because they can just wander into your area and decide, wow, all these dinosaurs here and this gigantic base look really tasty and just destroy everything. So we don't have that. But on our server, basically the biggest dinosaurs you can get is like a Spinosaurus and T-Rex. So those are kind of top tier, but it depends on what you're trying to achieve. The thing that I super love is the Argentavis. They're basically like a big hawk type bird thing. And they're incredible. They're like cargo ships that you can use as a smithy, craft all your stuff on it, go out and collect a bunch of metal, chuck them on there. They halve the weight of metal and everything. So they're really strong. They can carry a lot. I love them. They're great fun. So yeah.
Did you say you craft on the bird?
Yes.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
that's an interesting idea. So there's a forge on top of the bird?
It's basically, yes, there's a smithy on it. There's a whole bunch of other dinosaurs that when they are wearing a saddle, their saddle works as like a smithy or a forge. There's a phoenix in the game that is a forge, so you can actually smelt metal on it because it's so
wow.
hot.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah, so
we're just a stone throw away from Dino Riders, is what you're telling me.
pretty much, yes.
So, am I alone here and really wanting to play this game like at this exact moment? That sounds amazing.
We were
crap.
telling some friends the other day about sort of stuff that when you play the game in context, it makes total sense. But we were telling a friend that was just completely oblivious to the sort of stuff that happens in Ark. And so we have a snail a gigantic prehistoric snail that refuses to eat anything but cake.
Wait, is it called jam? Because that would be me. That just sounds like my spirit creature. I love it.
I can't remember what we call it. I think
Well, now it's jam.
Is that a randomly generated set of attributes? Like, or do all giant snails only eat cake in Ark?
All giant snails only eat cake.
Okay, good to know.
So they will literally just starve themselves to death if you offer them anything else. They're like, no, I demand cake.
Well, that just sounds like a failure of evolution to me.
I think
What
it's
I
the
would
future.
give to see the whiteboard where they planned that one out. That's interesting. All right, well, that sounds amazing. I probably want to play it at some point in the near future. Adrian, what's been going on with your gaming this last week? What's going on?
Well, there's one game that's taken my fancy. It may not be the one that you expect, Luke. I've actually been playing Steven Universe Save the Light on PS4.
Oh, nice.
Unexpected?
Yes, and that's mainly because I'm a huge Steven Universe fan, and the type of game that it is really appeals to me, which is the old Paper Mario style RPG. So this sort of style of turn-based combat where you have to use a button input to react to damage and to cause extra damage. So it's sort of like a turn-based RPG with a bit more proactive input involved in the combat. So it's not just push button and wait. And I'm really enjoying it. It's just a really very colourful, relaxed, very, very charming game that stays very faithful to the cartoon, which I actually very much enjoy. So I remember seeing that it was coming out, and I was keen on picking it up, and I thought the other night, oh, you know what? I think I might give that a go. So I'm quite enjoying that. So that's taken up a bit of my time at the moment. And then the other one, of course, is Dead Cells, which I've been playing right up until the few seconds before we started recording. So that's certainly taken my fancy as well. So those are the two that have been preoccupying me lately.
Well, we need to talk Dead Cells for a few minutes at least, because I'm super excited about this game too. So you probably played it a bit more recently than me, because I picked it up when it first launched on Early Access about a year or so ago, and I enjoyed it a lot then, and as a result of enjoying it a lot then, decided I wasn't going to touch it until it came out proper, because I didn't kind of want to spoil it for myself. But it seems like the stuff that they've changed for the 1.0 release is not massive compared to where it was at in the last couple of months. They seem to have added a bunch of features for streaming the game. Which is intriguing. Like I was reading a bit about that today. Apparently, there's like Twitch Plays integration as well, so you can actually get some people sort of watching you on Twitch to actually take control of bosses and all sorts of crazy shit like that.
It's really interesting. Yeah. I find it quite fascinating as to sort of like speaking to the evolution of games and how it sort of changes the interactive experience that gamers have, where it's almost a given that when you put out a game now, it's going to be Twitch streamed. And what kind of features would people expect from a game if they're going to be streaming it, and how that kind of changes the way people view games, whereas in the past that may have been an individual experience where you consume that media solely on your own. Now, games certainly have becoming this sort of much more platform experience where multiple people can enjoy it at the same time. That isn't just a multiplayer experience. You've got people viewing it and consuming it in that fashion as well. So yeah, those features are definitely very interesting in Dead Cells.
It's also free marketing for the dev essentially too, which is smart
well,
for you to support.
If people see a game, they might be more inclined to buy it. But yeah, I've been playing it. I picked it up probably about a month ago, and I've been playing it a fair bit, and I was curious to see what the official release would entail, and mostly from what I've seen, it's mainly lore-based additions to the game. So, and I thought, they might just add in a couple of scrolls or a bit of text, but the way they've done it's actually far more interesting than that, in that they've added whole little sections and rooms that you can enter. And your character will interact with a few things in the room and give a little exposition. And then occasionally you do actually get an item out of it. So I was quite chuffed to discover that too. So it's not purely a lore and background edition, but there is a little bit of item grabbing to be had too. So I enjoy that.
So for anyone who's been living under a rock in the last sort of week or so, or don't recall us talking about it when it first sort of hit early access, we did chat a little bit back then about it. Dead Cells is very much a combat-centric Metroidvania game, but it's a roguelike as well, in that the progress is sort of staged across a like a constantly procedurally generated environment, but it does kind of have the procedural generation is done in a very clever way. Like I think there's definitely constraints around it, so it's just not completely random because you can sort of find teleporters and jump around the place and sort of backtrack. But the whole idea is that the game is called Dead Cells because you're picking up cells from the monster enemies that you fight and trying to take them back to like a shopkeeper to sort of bank into upgrades that sort of stick with you permanently. But otherwise, when you die, you sort of lose everything. So you're basically trying to complete your run, take as many cells as back as you can, and so on and so forth. But there's heaps of bosses, there's heaps of sort of blocked routes of progression in very much in a Metroid style manner that you can kind of unlock once you get powers and upgrades and various different things. But overall, I mean, as far as the Metroidvania angle goes, I'd say it's a lot more Castlevania than Metroid because the platforming and combat style reminds me a lot of those early Castlevania games. But it plays smooth as hell. It's a really good feeling game. I think it's really fun to play.
It certainly echoes a lot of that sort of early platform gaming sort of rush response Twitch platforming, and that it is very satisfying. So like the controls are very sharp and very snappy. It's very similar in controlling fashion to Rogue Legacy, if anyone's played that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that,
Yeah, it's very similar in that sort of style of platforming. And funnily enough, though, there isn't a lot of trap avoiding to do. There's a few, spike pits here and a couple of chain balls here and there that you need to avoid, but nothing overly too dangerous. So I'm interested to see whether they might increase the stakes when it comes to the platforming side of the game, because it's mostly a combat-focused affair at the moment, I feel.
Is there much like randomness when it comes to upgrades or anything like that? Do you get like random relics sort of style stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, the main sort of draw of the game is a lot of these sort of. I mean, we'll talk about it a bit later in the segment, but it has that roguelite/roguelite-ish element to the game, where as you each run that you do, you will gather and unlock new items that are permanently added to the repertoire or the pool of items that can drop randomly. Okay. So there is sort of an exciting experience of like, ooh, what will I find on the next run? What new item will I be able to add to the catalogue? But there are slight differences in it that vary from other games in a similar genre, where like often the items don't affect each other. So you might have a sword and a bow that separately have different attributes and have different abilities, but they don't change the way that either one of them works. While as in some other roguelite style games, often you'll have sort of one item actually change the way that another one functions, which I find far more appealing. But it's still fantastic. I mean, the game has a lot going for it, so it's very enjoyable.
Cool.
Yeah. It also has a diet selector.
Yes, one thing we found out. Yeah. So in the game, as you can just pick up health as you kill enemies now and then, and traditionally it's like a chicken drumstick that drops on the ground. You pick it up and heal yourself. Luke discovered in the options menu there's about six different options for just changing what that item is that drops on the ground, and it's things like vegetarian, fruitarian, baguettes. One of the options is Monster, which
Monster's Castlevania as well, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So
Castlevania-esque. They've gotten around the IP by not using the word Castlevania. It's Castlevania.
Okay. So that was quite funny. But I showed my fiance, who's vegetarian, and she very much endorsed the idea of having a vegetarian option in the game. So you could pick up carrots and radishes instead of meat sticks and drumsticks. So
no gluten-free options.
No gluten-free options.
From an accessibility standpoint, is this the first video game that's catered for vegetarians?
I'm sure there's something else out there.
There must be. Yeah. So that's great. I mean, I'll touch a bit more about it in the later segment, but it's got a lot of good things going for it as a roguelite-ish genre game.
Nice. All right, now Christian, how's your week of gaming been going? Because I've seen some ups and downs.
The ups and downs is right. So this week I've only been playing Hearthstone, and what I was intending to do was to reach Legend before the expansion came out, which was today, the Boomsday Project, the new card set. And I got right up to the final boss, like if I win one more game, then I'm in Legend, and then once you've achieved that rank, you can't drop out of it until the rank resets at the end of the month. I lost that final boss match, and then not just that, but I slid all the way back to rank 5, which is basically like 2-3 days worth of progress that I lost.
Oof.
I went on the 2 worst losing streaks I've ever been on. And
I saw the stats. He's not exaggerating. It
yeah,
was shit.
yeah. What I really should have done, I should have followed everyone's advice who says when you get tilted, like when you're sort of getting frustrated with the game, stop playing.
Yep.
And then come back to it later. But I was on tilt and I was like, nah, it was total gambler's fallacy.
I was
like,
just about to say that. I was just
I've got to recoup my losses. I just got to recoup my losses.
Yeah. All I need is one good win.
That's right, just one good streak. That's it.
Yeah.
But I just slid and slid and slid, and I went all the way back to rank 5. But the silver lining, the reason that it doesn't actually bother me that much is because at least getting rank 1, like without getting legend, just normal rank 1, it means that when the month does reset, I'm already back at the highest rank floor. So it's okay. Like I got rank 1. That's what I usually go for each season, and legend is just a sort of cherry on top. So I'm not too stressed about it. But then the new card set came out today, and I opened 122 packs, and
Did you stay up till 1 a.m. to do it? Like crazy old me?
I stayed up to 1 a.m., but I actually didn't open my packs. I was just watching like other streamers open theirs, and I waited till the morning to open mine because I wanted to be at my PC. I was just watching on my mobile. So
like Christmas.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because at Christmas, everyone just wants to watch other people open presents. Fuck that.
True.
Christmas splits ring, telling you. It's a new big thing.
Yeah.
But my legendary drop rate was pretty abysmal in opening my packs too. I had a pretty poor luck there. But luckily I had enough dust sort of banked up that I could craft the extra legendaries that were kind of seemed essential for the set. So I'm not missing out. I just had a bit of a bad run of luck. But the actual games have been fun. Like my win rate since the expansion came out has improved, but that's mostly because everyone's just experimenting with random decks on ladder and it hasn't been refined yet.
Yeah, there's some easy pickings around the changeover for sure. People going a bit nuts. Yeah, I opened up all my packs last night and I did really well. Probably one of the best expansion openings I've had. Actually, I pulled out 12 legendaries out of about 140 packs.
Kidding me?
So yeah,
I got 4.
Oh, jeez.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm the white collar Hearthstone player this week. That's for sure. Just high roller Luke.
Oh my
it was
God.
great.
Luke, I think...
And I got good ones too. Like I didn't get many of the trash legendaries. Like a couple of my golds were the ones that I was most anticipating in the set.
You got golds? I didn't get any golds.
Well, I got golds as part of the pre-release
pre-orders?
bundles.
Yeah.
So, and I should clarify that 12 is inclusive of those two. So it's technically 10 that I pulled randomly. So
sometimes I swear this is total conspiracy thinking, but like that when you create a Blizzard account, you get given like a random seed, and that determine like your RNG is like based on your like account seed. And sometimes I'm just going to start a new Blizzard account and just like get better luck because. It's abysmal.
Surely they'll give a new player more legendaries.
This is the gambler psychology
Yeah.
creeping in there. I really think you need to...
I'm half joking.
There's got to be a 12-step program out there for you, I'm sure. No, it's been good fun.
Fortunately, the game's still fun. So as long as the game's still fun, it's all okay.
Yeah, all sorts of crazy stuff going around at the moment. This is one of the funnest times to play too because everyone's just working things out and back on sort of an even floor to a certain extent, which is great to watch.
Yeah.
But yeah. Jam,
Yes.
you and I got to do some stuff over the last few days as well, which has been fun.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I was on, was it Saturday? Playing No Man's Sky when it crashed on me. And I felt a bit burned because I couldn't remember how much progress I'd lost. So I was sitting around and a few other people jumped on and we were trying to figure out between like the 5 of us what game we had that we could all play together. And we ended up settling on GTA, which we hadn't played in ages. And I jumped in and tried some of the new content. I bought a nightclub. It's very fancy. It's all purple and golds. And I hooked up all of...
And it has porn everywhere.
I mean, the wallpaper's interesting. It's pretty great.
Yeah.
And I hooked up my other totally legitimate enterprises to the underground basement. Where I hired some people to manage those enterprises. And yeah, now it's raking me in money. It's interesting. I haven't played a lot of the new stuff, but I had to go promoting my nightclub, which involved going to the airport, jumping on a huge blimp, and just flying over like different parts of town, blasting the music of my recently hired DJ, which was weird. And I could deploy flares just in case someone tried to shoot a missile at me, because it was very slow. But yeah, it's good fun. I mean, I miss this game. I've loved this game. I've played it so much, as some people discovered when they jumped online with me for the first time and saw my level. Yeah, but good fun.
I've really been missing it as well, but the reason I haven't played for a while is because earlier in the year my account got hacked and I hadn't done anything about reclaiming it yet. So,
silly.
Yeah, so I was out of action for a while, but I decided, like, when Jam jumped in on the weekend, I thought, no, fuck this, I'm going to finally sort it out. So I dug through my old emails, found the one where I was notified of my account being taken over. I managed to sort of, go through some links and sort of restore it after a 2-hour waiting sort of chat with one of the Rockstar employees on the live chat. Finally managed to work it out. As it turns out, some Russian dickhead managed to get into my account, change everything around. Luckily, he didn't sort of, scrap all my progress. He basically just, spent a bunch of the money that I had. But completely changed the character appearance, changed my handle, like all the colours of my vehicles, all that sort of shit. So I had to go clean everything up, reset it all back to how it was.
It's the Russian hackers again.
Oh, you're not wrong, hey. Fucking Putin now just getting into GTA. And that's where I draw the line, friends. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, but that is finally all restored now, so I'm back on, and I've been playing a bunch the last few days and really enjoying it. That game is still so kick-ass.
It's the best. I mean, we played a bunch of the stunt races and transform races the other night. It was hilarious. I managed to spin out Ari on every single lap, or the first lap of every race. He was fuming. It was just so satisfying. There was rage.
So there's this bounty thing going on at the moment as well, which is like a precursor to Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh, yes.
So you can actually go after some people who I think have jumped bail, and if you manage to find them and basically just beat them up with your fists, like you can't actually shoot them, you need to like knock them out and then handcuff them and take them back. Apparently the last step is you actually get involved in a stone hatchet fight with a bunch of people. I haven't done that bit yet.
I've located all of the bounties and then... For my good services, I got tipped off to the location of some treasure, went and found a tiny little chest which had the stone hatchet in it, and now I have to kill 25 people to earn some in-game currency and unlock the hatchet for Red Dead Redemption 2. So that's, scheduled in. I got to do that.
Just driving around like scalping fools with the tongue.
I mean,
that's awesome.
I don't think driving's going to help, but maybe running madly.
Yep. At great speeds. Absolutely. Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, that's a fair bit of games. So let's kick into some news. Matt, I'm going to throw to you first. So what's on the ticket tonight? What's been going on?
So there was announced that Fallout 76 will not be launching on Steam at
Very
release.
Interesting.
That's not necessarily unusual for them, since Fallout Vault, that also did not launch on Steam. It took like a year before it appeared on Steam. I'm pretty sure that they're basically trying to do what Blizzard is doing with their, like Battle.net type thing. So, we have our own system where we're delivering this stuff. And it's kind of funny.
Is that a new system that Bethesda's going to be launching, or do they have one that I don't know about?
They've had one for a long time. It was originally how Fallout Vault got launched, I believe, on PC. It took a year before it appeared on Steam. Yeah.
I did not know that.
So my question is it polished? Because it's Bethesda.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it the jankiest launcher ever?
Yeah. Well, I'll put it this way. The fact that you all haven't actually heard of it is probably a good sign in this case.
Can't be worse than Games for Windows Live that Fallout 3 ran on. That was a trash fire.
Yeah.
If I open the Bethesda launcher, will I clip through the floor and jettison into space?
Your chair will just start vibrating.
Are we expecting to be able to connect to servers on day one? Basically.
I imagine it will probably work. I hope.
I mean, they're doing the beta, so fingers crossed.
Yeah.
What's the modding community like for this client? I want to see like the crazy nude mods for the client.
It's inevitable.
I can give you one of those. Just let me set up my webcam.
Yeah.
For a second there, I thought you were actually talking about like modding through the client, which was like, I'm pretty sure that's a thing.
No, I mean like the actual interface. Like I want like
like the old Winamp skins.
Yes,
kind of thing.
yeah.
But yeah, so that was one piece of news. And I also stayed up super late last night because I was curious and watched the Destiny 2 combat reveal stream for Forsaken, which they announced a whole bunch of new changes. It was a little bit tedious because they spent a lot of time just showing off gameplay, and it's like, this looks like Destiny, which is cool by me, but at the same time, I want to see something new. So they were talking about the fact that they've changed how weapon loadouts work. So your primary and secondary slot now, you can actually have shotguns in your primary slot and sniper rifles in your primary slot, but they have to be tagged as primary slot weapons, as I understand it. But the thing is that what they've gone and done that's super interesting now is that ammo type is something that can change from weapon to weapon. So you can have a weapon in the primary slot that uses secondary weapon ammo, energy weapon ammo. Like, and this all ties into how PvP will work. So when you spawn into PvP now, you spawn in with your primary and secondary ammo. You get enough secondary ammo to kill 2 people. So for a shotgun, that's 2 rounds.
Oh.
But if you spawn in with a shotgun in the first slot and a shotgun in the second slot, that means you're only going to have 2 shotgun rounds between them. So you have one in one gun and one in the other.
That would be foolish.
Seems bad.
The whole idea basically being that you can use that to not just suddenly become incredibly overpowered. The other really neat thing is that there's a whole bunch of exotics that are going to come and appear that will actually be able to appear in the secondary energy weapon slot and the primary slot that are like rocket launchers and grenade launchers, and they'll actually use that heavy weapon type, but they'll be in that slot. So you can technically have 2 of them, as I understand it. Yeah, so that's pretty neat. But other than that, they announced the fact, what we kind of suspected all along, there's 9 brand new subclasses with whole new supers that get attached to them. They've made some very dramatic changes to a whole bunch of the classes. I'm most excited about the fact that Dawnblade is actually now like a fully built-out healer. So they have a healing grenade that you can actually toss at your friends. It's really, it's a cool idea. I really like it.
So it's literally that Phoenix theme again, sort of coming back from the dead. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so it is looking really, really promising. Like, a whole lot of the stuff that they're changing is really cool. I'm not too happy about the fact that they're talking about lowering the time to kill again. So it's going to be really quick, more Call of Duty-esque, whereas I kind of liked it when it was a bit more thoughtful and a bit more strategic. But yeah, no, it's looking really good.
Are they adding new enemies to the game?
Yes. So the enemies in Forsaken are like a conglomerate of all the other species, and you can kind of tell that like you have Hive wearing fallen armor and that sort of thing. It looks really neat. But
is that kind of like the what was it, the
ice
Fallen or the Taken or whatever they were?
Yeah, the Taken, the Fallen are the purple sort of scavenger dudes that are in the opening mission.
But like the Taken were just like a conglomeration of the other races, weren't they?
Yes,
they're like shadowy
ones.
Yeah, black hole looking
Possessed.
dudes.
But on the plus side, like, while it's a similar concept to what we've gotten before, these are very physical, so they're not going to go teleporting around everywhere and doing really, frankly, bullshit stuff that I hated. Good. But it's a whole new race, essentially, the way it's being treated. Like, they will do their own thing. They've got like a whole bounty system. So you'll be sent out to hunt down their leadership, and one of their leaders will be like a sniper. And you've got to have a snipe off with them. You have to kill them with a sniper rifle. You have to be better at what they do.
That's so good.
Interesting.
That's very Metal Gear boss fight-esque. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. That's cool. Yeah, no, I actually jumped in a little bit this week and played some of the events that they've got on at the moment in the lead up to Forsaken, the one where they're offering the level 400 armor. And a lot of it's kind of replaying sort of past levels, but they have ramped up the difficulty quite a bit. So it is, it's been interesting. There seems to be a bit more buzz happening around the game at the moment, which is good to see. So after the lull that it's had in recent months, so yeah, I'll be playing it when it comes out. And Matt, if you're keen, I'll jump in with you.
Absolutely,
as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna play it. Destiny's one of those games, as I think I've said it before. Like, I want to love it. I want to come back and be convinced to just hit the daily grind in that game again, but it hasn't quite captured me yet, and I'm hoping Forsaken does that. So
I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of catching things, what's going on, Adrian?
What are you implying? Oh, Pokemon. Okay. So, so Pokemon Niantic has revealed, sort of through other means, that they will be adding PvP Pokemon battling to Pokemon Go toward the end of the year. So that's pretty exciting. The news was announced by the European region marketing manager, and I think at a conference where she let it slip. And so they're looking at bringing in battling and adding a few changes to the way your friends list works in the game as well. So at the moment, you can currently add friends in the game, and they go onto your friends list in the menu, and then you can actually give those people nicknames. But for people that have a lot of friends, it actually is quite hard to keep track of who they all are and where they're all from. So they're looking at adding a few more features to that section of the game as well. So you can, they use the word segregate, which I don't know if is the perfect choice of words, but it says means you can segregate your friends list, which so
It's
just as long as
technically correct.
yes,
Let's be real. I'll be doing exactly that because there is a whole bunch of tags that need to go on my friends that say Facebook random.
Yeah.
I would have gone with like categorize,
rather
organize.
than segregate.
Quarantine is good as well.
So it's probably a poor choice of word, but James is right. It does sort of sum up exactly what it means. But that'll be interesting because, I mean, obviously one of the core tenets of Pokemon is battling. So it'll be interesting to see what they implement. There's no word yet on the mechanics of what it is or how it will function. But that's sort of some exciting news that's come out this week. Being a bit of a Pokemon Go freak, I'm quite keen on that and battling with a few of the ones that I've collected. So it should be fun.
I mean, it's probably just going to be tapping the screen a lot, like the existing battles, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not expecting them to put in like an RPG battle system.
Well, they've only got 2 moves apiece, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the appeal probably lies more around what the kind of objectives and rewards may be around battling. So instead of it itself being an intriguing, fascinating part of the game, I'm intrigued more in like the objectives, like the daily objectives, could include now battle a friend or, win a battle against a friend or something like that. So I just like that it's sort of expanding the Pokemon Go experience, maybe not so much as, the battling itself being super fun.
And there's going to have to be some sort of reward because it's going to make your Pokemon faint and consume your items. So there needs to be some sort of compensation for that because the mechanics themselves, like you say, probably aren't going to be very fun.
You're just sort of smacking the screen until one of you faints. But maybe if there's a Stardust reward or maybe
candy.
Candy is the elusive treat that we all crave. So if I can get candy from smacking down your Pokemon, all the better. Mm-hmm. That would be nice.
It must be a local sort of a radius thing, though, similar to when you find Pokestops and gyms, because that would deal with some of the latency issues that would be created by doing it over a distance. So.
And like with trading, I'm sure they'll use the same sort of code that they're doing with the trading for the battling.
Yeah, it would make sense.
I tell you what I want. I want it to be like the old videos that we saw a while back where basically you walk down the street and you see someone on a park bench with a phone out and then your eyes just connect and you give each other the fucking death stare and then it's on for young and old.
And then they're not playing Pokemon and they call the police and then...
Damn it.
This guy just came up to me and started screaming and throwing rocks at me.
Demanding candy. He was demanding candy.
Throwing his balls at me and demanding candy. Oh, Jesus. Oh, no. Yeah.
So in other news, Blizzard have been teasing the skins for the next Overwatch Summer Games, which starts tomorrow for us, August 9th. And they look pretty neat. Have you seen them? I love the diva. There's a Wave Racer diva. She's got her bathers on and beautiful hibiscus all over the diva mech. It's awesome.
Wouldn't it be cool if they changed her weapon to like a water gun
Just bubbles.
as well? Yeah.
Bubble gun.
There's some really cool legendary ones. And also there's going to be a new map in Busan, which is Diva's place of origin. So, yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know about that.
I'm looking forward to playing more. I've been playing a bit in the last few days since I think Sunday when Imogen realised that Mayhem was live. We jumped on and went mad. So much fun. Very exciting.
I have to jump back in. I haven't played Overwatch for quite a few months, but I'm keen to sort of get back in and give it another go.
Yeah.
So are they doing like another game like they did with the Lucio Ball?
I'm sure Lucio Ball's coming back. I didn't actually check. I just assumed. But yeah, it's been a pretty big mainstay. I love Winston. Winston's dressed up as a catcher and he's got sunglasses and he looks awesome.
Maybe they'll do Lucio Ball with Hammond and actually have the wrecking ball as the ball.
That would be funny.
That's a good idea.
That would be kind of cool.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, you try and score a goal and it just pops out and shoots you.
I think like Bridget would make a good goalie as well with
That's
the
true.
shield and the whip.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
That'd be cool. They do need to mix it up a bit, though, because I think that, it's pretty close to Rocket League in a lot of respects, and they need to make it its own thing a bit more, I think. But, it's cool. All right, well, I want to dive into one that's sort of been firing up in the last 48 hours just to wrap things up tonight. This has been a very interesting story. So with the launch of the the full 1.0 version of Dead Cells that we sort of talked about at the top of the show. There have been, of course, a whole bunch of embargoes lifting on the Dead Cells reviews, and a lot of the major media outlets have been getting their reviews up sort of slightly ahead of time and then after the game's launch proper. Now, this is an interesting one because it's a game that's coming out of early access. There have been a few reviews that have sort of been released early because people have been effectively able to look at the product prior to the final update and still get a pretty good feel for what is going on with the game without the last couple of changes. Now, as it turns out, there was a review posted up on IGN which rated the game at a 97% and was actually done by their Nintendo editor, whose name was Philippe Miuchin. I think I've pronounced it correctly, Miuchin. I'm not sure if that's exact, but anyway. So he's been working with IGN for a while now, and then after the review came out, it didn't take long for someone to sort of put their hand up and say, hey, this review is almost exactly a copy of the one that I did on my site. And it turns out that there was actually a YouTube channel that had been running for a little while called Boomstick Gaming. Now, comparatively in size to IGN, this is, small potatoes. They only had, thousands of followers as opposed to
12,000, I think is the number he had.
Yeah. So, I mean, not tiny, but certainly, not huge compared to what is effectively the largest video gaming news site, in the world at the moment. And there were people sort of saying, surely it's, just a similar sort of conversation because, in games media, sometimes, particularly when, games developers send around bullet-listed talking points to reviewers, sometimes the same sort of narrative can get picked up with the way that, that narrative is structured. But no, if you actually look very closely at the words that were used during the video review and the written review, and IGN actually published a video version of their review as well, the similarities are so striking that there really couldn't be any question that there was some dodgy shit going on. So IGN very quickly responded and pulled the review. And put up a placeholder saying that they're investigating, and the internet blew up, as you'd expect. So, and then they actually followed up today and basically released a statement saying that they'd reviewed the... Actually, I'll just read it quickly because it's not super long, and I think this covers it in a bit more detail. So, we've reviewed the allegations against one of our writers regarding our review of Dead Cells. After taking the time to investigate, we've determined that there were substantial similarities between a review posted weeks earlier and our review that could not be justified and warranted taking down. Blah, 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 blah. We apologise to the readers, developer Motion Twin, and most especially the YouTuber known under Boomstick Gaming for failing to uphold these standards. Now, they sort of go on a little bit about their review process and how seriously they take it and the fact that they've now let that reviewer go. And I suspect that, with all of the fire and brimstone that's raining down on him at the moment, especially via his social media presence, he's probably done as far as freelance sort of journalism in the gaming space goes. I don't think anyone's going to be pretty keen to pick him up after this point. But just later this afternoon, it was actually revealed that there were some other reviews that he wrote a few months back that were also bearing striking similarities to some other ones that were out there. So this seems to link to maybe a bit of a pattern of behavior that's gone on for a while here. So, but yeah, no, it's interesting. Like I tend to think that there's going to be a lot of vitriol directed IGN's way that is probably unwarranted, and dogpiling on them is maybe not the right call at the moment.
No, definitely not.
But they're an industry sort of whipping boy anyway. People love to hate on IGN because they're the tall poppy and they represent games journalism.
Yeah. It is a tricky one, like especially as far as that conversation around games journalism and the toxic culture sort of stuff that happened with Gamergate a few years back. It's it always risks rising its ugly head again. But the one observation I did make in this case, which I thought was interesting and perhaps a little disappointing, is that there was no mention anywhere of IGN actually paying the original author of the piece for his work.
You need to look in the responses to the Twitter conversation. So Per Schneider, one of the I can't remember his, but like not CEO, but one of the owners or operators of IGN has said that they have reached out and made an offer to the guy that was plagiarized. So they
that's nice.
That's really good.
Yeah, something about like the ad revenue from the review or something like that. Someone was like, yeah, you should do this. And then they were like actually we have, but the details are a private matter. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I think that's good. Like maybe they could have mentioned that they've come to an arrangement and the details are private, so that digging through Twitter is not necessary to define that bit of information, because that was immediately my thought. But I would not have known that if you hadn't mentioned it.
They're still trying to resolve it. Like, it's still
True,
early days,
true.
and they've handled it very well so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if they have done that, that's great. I think that's absolutely the right thing to do, and I think it's good to resolve it that way. And at the end of the day, Boomstick Gaming has had a very, very big spike in new subscribers as a result of all this stuff. So. Yeah, they've probably done okay out of it in the end, despite what went down. But by the same token, I think IGN's also got its fair few views out of this too. So, yeah, they're going to be cleaning up after this one for a while, though. I think this is a stain that's not going to come out in the wash overnight, for sure.
Just quickly, the details on that offer. So it was by the company co-founder and chief content officer, and somebody said, have you considered giving the ad revenue from the review to Boomstick Gaming? He has a Patreon and is working hard. And then Pierce said, yes, we have talked about other steps behind the scenes. Our editorial manager has reached out with a proposal along those lines. So that's what's said.
Yeah. Props to IGN.
This sort of stuff
because, as a big company, you wouldn't necessarily feel the need to do that, but they're clearly trying to do the right thing.
So I think it's really tough to sort of say if they could have done any more to prevent this, because, I mean, it could have really happened to any major outlet. The fact that it was IGN is not surprising given their size, but how do you prevent this kind of plagiarism? I mean, you maybe can't necessarily expect every editor out there that has a submission come across their desk to check every other site, on the internet, particularly video ones where you can't just sort of do like a text search to see if there's any matches, similar to what university students do when they're submitting work.
Yeah, I was going to say, like in academia, we have that where you can submit your paper for a review, and it like automatically scans the world of academia and looks for gives you a similarity index, so you can make any necessary changes. But nothing like that for gaming at the moment. So
or videos.
I think that there is actually a way to do it, because I know that some of the tools for the academia stuff you can enter in like website URLs and that sort of thing, and it will just go and scan and like highlight comparisons. One of my friends used to actually be a lecturer, and they basically were using a very, very similar tool, but they were looking at programming code, and there's no academia website for programming code. They're looking just through GitHub, basically.
Yeah.
And that was apparently working really, really effectively. I was actually going to say, like, it's kind of funny that basically the sort of thing that university students do so often has actually ended out at IGN. And it's really difficult to prevent and catch, so I can't really blame them.
Yeah, particularly when you're casting a net as wide as all of YouTube.
Exactly, yeah.
It starts to get a bit
It's like
crazy.
any Twit employee, though. Like, you have to balance micromanagement and trust. Ugh.
Yeah, it's a tough one. All right, well, anyway, good to see that that's shaken out the way it has. But let's kick into our main topic tonight. Now, we thought we would give the floor, of course, to Matt and Adrian, because it's a good opportunity to allow all of our listeners to learn a bit more about you guys. And rather than sort of just going through, what your gaming history is, we thought we'd actually do a bit of a spotlight on a couple of your guys' favourite sort of gaming genres, and chat a little bit about what they are and what they mean to you. So, do we want to kick off with anyone in particular tonight? Who would like to put their hand up? Let's throw it out to the two of you.
I'll go. I've got the.
right.
I was prepared to jump in first if I needed to, so I'll.
It's also alphabetical, so that's
sure, I'll take that bullet. Cool. So, my favourite game genre, at least in the last couple of years, has been the roguelike genre. Now, it's actually quite a problematic statement to even make that I like roguelikes, because what I actually enjoy more is games with roguelike elements, or what you would consider roguelites or roguelike-likes. So as you can see, we're getting into murky territory, much like sort of when you try to define any fluid and ever-changing set of circumstances. It's not easy to label one thing as one thing. So I thought what I would do is just talk about what roguelikes are, what the elements of a roguelike game is, and how to identify them. And then you may realize that you've been playing games that have sort of roguelike elements in them without even realizing it. So the main sort of bit of information I found was that in 2008 there was the International Roguelike Development Conference. So at this conference in Berlin, they actually tried to define what a roguelike is. And so, according to their definition, a roguelike must contain a series of either high-value or low-value factors. So what I might do is I might read a couple of these out. You guys can help me identify and explain what they are. So some of the high-value factors that you might find in a roguelike game are random environment generation. So this is something that we've seen recently across all sorts of games, for example, in Dead Cells, in other roguelite games, things like Binding of Isaac or FTL, where each time you play through the game, it's random. The experience is randomized to create a greater sense of replayability.
Now, I want to name a game and then see how long it takes until it's excluded based on this criteria. So that first one, Minecraft fits that.
That's true. That's true. So one of the statements they talk about in this definition is they say that a game doesn't need to contain all of these factors, and it doesn't need to contain some of the factors. So it sort of does speak to the fact that it is an ever-changing genre and that it's not to be defined too strictly. So as an example, what you just said about Minecraft, technically Diablo falls into this category as well as having roguelike elements in it. So it's just sort of... It says roguelikes refers to a genre not merely like rogue, and the genre is represented by its canon. And it says this list can be used to determine how roguelike a game is. So rather than saying if something is fully roguelike or not, it's more giving you a bit of a scale as to where it falls. And it says missing some points does not mean the game is not roguelike, and likewise possessing some points does not mean the game is a roguelike. And I think a lot of these factors are a lot of general gaming factors anyway.
All right, give us the factors.
Yeah, do you guys want to guess what some of them might be? And I can tell you if they're on the list.
I'll have a guess at one of them. I think one of them will have to be around sort of resetting progression or some sort of reset standard.
Like a lack of save state sort of thing?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you might be referring to permadeath. Is that sort of what? Yeah. So that is one of the high value factors of a roguelike. So in permadeath, you're not expected to win the game on your first try or with your first character. So you start over when you die, and then depending on the style of game, you may or may not have some progress left over from your previous run. Some of the other factors are grid-based. So this is talking about roguelikes.
That's very strict.
Yeah, in the original fashion. So I should explain, the name roguelikes stems back to a game that came out in the 80s called Rogue. And this was...
Atari game, right?
Yes, it's actually played in ASCII, which is that sort of coding language with symbols. So what it was a D&D style dungeon game. Imagine like laying out a map and then proceeding through the map room by room and fighting monsters and things like that. So it's a very old style game, and because that game was called Rogue, it technically spawned the first generation of roguelike games. So they've actually been around since early days, since the 80s. And there are dyed-in-the-wool roguelike fans who will claim that only games that are like Rogue, that are grid-based... The main three factors for a traditional Rogue game are permadeath, turn-based combat, and grid-based. And these are the three elements that make up a classic roguelike game. So a lot of the games...
Definitely been a divergence from that.
Yeah, definitely. So as you can imagine, a lot of the games that we now consider to be roguelike, and often, in the Steam store, they'll be labelled as roguelike. If you were going to stick to the Berlin definition, technically they're not. And they're more roguelite or roguelike-like. So it's an ever-changing sort of genre. But anyway, some of these other factors, we have complexity, which means the game allows for several solutions to a common goal. Resource management, where you need to manage your resources in order to survive. Hack and slash is a high factor. Exploration, permadeath, like we said, randomness. These are all high value factors. Some of the low value factors can be interesting things like monsters being similar to players, where monsters in the game are affected by the same set of rules that players are. Tactical challenge, dungeons, and controlling a single character. So it's quite interesting reading through the list and then trying to work out what truly defines a roguelike. But I think what we're seeing now is the language is being used more as a placeholder for any kind of game that contains any of these sort of factors. So
a lot of it's marketing spin too. I mean, if a developer wants to label their game like that because the fans are going to pick up on it, then that's something that they will actively pursue as well, I suspect.
Yeah,
it's a shortcut to you might like this game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's often how it's framed as well. And I mean, there are even this particular Berlin Conference definition, I've actually found a couple of articles that actually are unhappy with the definition anyway. So even it itself, like any sort of discipline, aren't truly sort of set in stone. So, but I thought I might give some examples of roguelikes. So we've talked a lot about what a roguelike might contain, but once you hear some of the games, you might think, oh yeah, that does fit that criteria. So some traditional roguelikes are like the one I mentioned, Rogue. There's an older game called NetHack, which is another version. Caves of Qud, spelled Qud, which is a more sort of modern version of that. Another one available on Steam is Dungeons of Dreadmore. And FTL, I kind of feel fits into that more classic rogue style game because it is more grid-based and top-down and a little bit less...
Not technically turn-based, but you can pause.
Sure,
so
yeah,
kind
okay.
of, yeah.
And then we have examples of more roguelite games. So the big one that everyone loves to talk about, of course, is Binding of Isaac. So that game has some real classic roguelike elements without being a true roguelike on its own. And then Spelunky is heralded as being one of the early games with roguelike elements that really kicked off the genre and really started a huge wave of new roguelike games.
Also because it's really friggin' good.
Yeah. And it's a Spelunky Rogue Legacy, recently Enter the Gungeon, and of course Dead Cells. These are all sort of games with what you will commonly see referred to as roguelike elements or roguelites. And then it even starts to get even a little more broad when you start bringing in a new term that I've seen recently, which is Roguevania, which is what Dead Cells is often referred to as, a Roguevania game. But interestingly enough, searching for that term reveals only one result, which is Dead Cells.
Would Risk of Rain be under that category?
Risk of Rain technically is just a roguelite or contains roguelike elements. I do love Risk of Rain, but it doesn't have the same Metroidvania-esque layout that Dead Cells does.
You do tend to see a lot of combos where it's like roguelike combined with one other major genre. I mean, Dead Cells is the perfect example because it's like roguelike and Metroidvania.
Yep.
The Enter the Gungeon, roguelike plus bullet hell.
Yes, yeah.
Crypt of the Necrodancer, roguelike plus, rhythm game.
Yeah. Yep.
It's usually 1 + 1 = new spin.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, the takeaway from this is mainly that it's called roguelike for a reason. That it's based off the original game called Rogue. So if you were really sticking traditionally to what roguelike is, then it's one of those sort of old style dungeon crawler tile-based games with permadeath and that sort of thing. But the reason I love these particular games is because I find myself hard-pressed for time lately when I sit down to play a video game, and I find roguelite-style games give me a really quick reward response without having to sink too many hours into it, and I find that I am achieving, ironically enough, although you suffer from permadeath a lot, you achieve quite a lot just from chipping away at it bit by bit, and I find that keeps me engaged. And as Christian will attest to, I usually, when I engage with something, I tend to go hard and fast for a very short period of time and then move on to something else. So
you're like a world devourer. You just like strip all of the nutrients from one game and then move on to the next.
I tend to be a bit of a Galactus in that sense, and not just because of my size. So I like to...
I didn't mean it that way.
No, I know. But you're right, I do. And Luke, you've seen that recently when I got into Destiny as well. I tend to latch my claws into something and, like Christian said, drain it of all of its worth before moving on, and then forgetting almost instantly major components of the game itself. So,
you do
we all
that too?
have our hype
for example, I'll play a game, something like The Walking Dead on Steam. I remember playing that and then within a week forgetting everything that happened in that game, not even remembering characters' names. It's terrible.
I feel ya.
Well, even like we were all like so hardcore into Monster Hunter earlier this year.
Yeah.
And like we went really hard on that, Adrian, looking at all of the different gems and the different sets and everything like that. And I'd need like a PowerPoint refresher course on that game to get back into it.
I don't even remember the monsters' names anymore.
No.
Jay Leno.
No.
That's all I remember.
Odogaron.
Yeah. Pookie. That's the only one I remember.
Oh yeah,
It's fun.
Pookie.
Yeah, it's fun to say. Yeah, but I mean, in summary, I had to think long and hard when I was asked what is my favourite genre. And in the end, what I did was just look back through my Steam library and figure out which game I've logged the most hours in. It's actually Awesome Nauts, not a roguelite. But I've got like 400 hours in Awesome Nauts. But Binding of Isaac was the next in line with, I think, just over 300 hours.
Yeah.
So
I was living with Adrian when he first got into Binding of Isaac, and he was on it a lot. The hours just clocking up and endlessly going through it. Yeah. So I can attest to that.
I remember dreaming about it. I remember it being that bad, where it was
That
infiltrating.
sounds like a terrible dream.
It's not a great thing to be dreaming about. It was infiltrating my subconscious and making me paranoid, and so. But yeah, in summary, that's sort of a little bit about roguelites and what you might come to experience from them. But for anyone looking at picking up a roguelite or a roguelike to play, I would definitely, the top three I would probably suggest are FTL, Spelunky, and Binding of Isaac are probably the three big ones that I think would give you a good taste of what to expect. And they're all a little bit different from each... Well, not a little bit. They are quite different from each other, but still contain familiar elements that are sort of familiar across the roguelike genre. And that'll give you an idea of what to expect.
And there was Into the Breach recently too, which was one of our party games a couple of months ago.
Into the Breach was fantastic. I loved that. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah.
One of my other favourites from recent years as well was Sundered. Did you guys ever play that?
No, I never played that.
No, that's really cool. It was kind of like a... I mean, again, because it's my thing, very Metroidvania style of roguelike, but, it was kind of like a fantastical sort of, platforming through the world, fighting these giant creatures that took up the entire screen and sort of, it was very Final Fantasy-esque, like the old Final Fantasy games and the old JRPGs where you have like a boss fight where suddenly your character zooms in and, you've got this thing that's like 20 times the size of you and, it was a lot of fun.
Luke, one game you definitely need to play is Hollow Knight. Have you...
yes. No, it's on my list. I really fucking want to play it soon.
That's more of a soul... Is that a Souls-like?
It's not... It doesn't strictly fit into this category. It's what... Again, it's another sort of genre where it's sort of called Soulsvania, which is almost kind of what Dead Cells is. So it combines elements of Metroid and Dark Souls more than anything else, where you fight really difficult bosses, and when you die, you drop all your resources, and then you have to get back to your corpse to collect those resources.
Like a checkpointing system as well.
That's right.
Getting to the next respawn area is another feature of the Souls-like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I churned through Hollow Knight in a couple of days, but not because it's quick, because I spent hours and hours on it. And it's fantastic, and I would love a little plushie of the main character. That would be awesome, which I think you can buy.
Well, they're an Australian developer, so you could probably organise that.
Yeah, I have seen it. Yeah, it's a really good game, and I think just while we're on the topic, it's completely unique in its tone, atmosphere, and flavour. I haven't played anything else like it, maybe apart from Dark Souls itself, where it's got that really, really lovely sort of lore where you'll bump into NPCs and they talk to you as if you're halfway through a conversation. They don't introduce themselves and explain their backstory. They just talk to you as if you've always been there, and it really makes you feel part of the world. And it has that really almost metaphorical nature to it, where everything is spoken in metaphor and lore, and it's up to you to put it all together. And that's, for me, one of my favourite things in games is when you're that show don't tell attitude in games. Hollow Knight's really good for that. So I would, considering how much you're into Metroidvanias, I think it's right at the top of the list.
Oh, I know, I will love it. I just need to play more Dead Cells first, otherwise I'll just switch entirely, and I don't want to do that.
That's fair. Yep.
Yeah. Matt, who is the dev of Hollow Knight? It's on the tip of my tongue.
I cannot remember. I think they're Melbourne or Adelaide based. I did look it up. Yeah, I'm terrible at remembering names. It's a really bad thing in the games industry.
We'll swing back to it before the end of the episode.
Team Cherry.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Team Cherry.
Yeah. Team Cherry?
Team Cherry, yep.
Nice. Yeah, sweet. All right. Well, Matt, over to you. What's on the menu tonight?
Well, here's my essay on RPGs.
Pick a nice big one. Yeah, it's good.
Actually, so Adrian touched on some stuff that I was actually going to talk about as well. I'm actually going to reel it back a bit to make a comment about the roguelike stuff, because this does relate to some of the stuff I was going to talk about with RPGs, but the term roguelike has actually kind of become a buzzword almost. It's nice to be classified as being a roguelike title, because the thing about RPGs is that there's RPG elements in so many games, but nobody goes and says this is an RPG because we have RPG elements. So a lot of the time it just gets taken for granted now. It's just one of those things that kind of becomes just expected in a video game. So I was going to make a point later on. I'm just going to go ahead and make it now. There's RPG elements in games like Stellaris. There's RPG elements in games like NBA Live's The One. The fact it is a sports game that you can actually level up the character and put points into stats and everything. And that's one of the things that I was actually going to discuss.
Do you think it's fair to say that like any game that has a story element has almost become synonymous with an RPG?
I would disagree to that.
Almost, because like when you go back and look at early RPGs, they were all text based. They were fairly linear. They were heavily influenced by Dungeons and Dragons, and in a big way, they were like this proto-genre type thing where there was elements of what we kind of our point-and-click adventure games deviated from at some stage. And now, in a big way, there's a lot of stuff where you can kind of say, what is the difference between an adventure game and an RPG that makes them have that definition, right? Like, why can't you have an adventure game that's also an RPG? Like, what's the difference between them? So my personal favorite kind of RPGs, I'm a big fan of Western RPGs. I grew up on BioWare RPGs like Neverwinter Nights and Jade Empire. I adore Jade Empire. It totally deserves a sequel. If anybody from BioWare is listening, get on that.
Ambitious.
Just fix Mass Effect first and then get on that. Yeah.
I think Mass Effect's dead now.
It's probably going to have a nap for a while. It'll be back one day, I imagine.
Stop! It's already dead.
But the thing that really kind of solidified my love of RPGs, funnily enough, and the game that I probably spent the most time in as far as an RPG goes, is World of Warcraft. Which, in a lot of ways, I've discussed this with people before, but not on the podcast. But what about World of Warcraft makes it an RPG as part of the MMORPG, right? Because
quick question on that, just before you go further into World of Warcraft specifically. I've noticed in recent years, and by recent years I mean probably the last 5 or so, that a lot of MMORPGs are now just being referred to as MMOs. Now, do you think that that's because they've actually started to tone back the RPG elements, or just because people got sick of the mouthful?
No, I think that I think most MMOs are still MMORPGs. It's just that it's shortened. It's the shortened method of saying it, right? Like, I do think that there's a lot of MMOs out there that aren't RPGs, where they're just kind of like first-person shootery type things in a massive environment. But it's also one of those things where there's RPG elements in so many games that, again, like with World of Warcraft, it has the RPG, but I don't necessarily think it deserves the RPG part of the name, necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I just want to throw out one kind of shorthand that I've tended to use for thinking about what an RPG is, and it's that like your progression through the game isn't based on overcoming challenges based on your skill, but on your character sort of numerically improving or gaining new attributes. Whereas like a game like Uncharted or something like that, you need to like get better at the game and overcome challenges through your like hand-eye coordination, that sort of stuff. But Nathan Drake doesn't actually improve. Yep. So you could technically kill the last boss straight away. Whereas in an RPG, to me, you could never kill the last boss straight away, no matter how good you are at the game, because your character needs to progress.
Yes, I do agree with that. Because otherwise, like, you look at games like Pokemon, and it's like, is that an RPG? But this is where I kind of get to the thing that I think is like a core element of what makes an RPG, and it's choice. So, like, if you have your character and you're leveling them up, you have to make choices about what they are going to become to tackle those challenges. So in World of Warcraft, there is an RPG element that's very basic in that you choose your class, and that kind of defines how the challenges that you face are going to have to be tackled, basically. But in terms of like, okay, I level up, I'm going to start putting points into things. Vanilla World of Warcraft did have that. It had nice branching skill trees where you could, completely define what your character was. Whereas World of Warcraft now, it's basically as you level up, you're basically selecting a specific specialization you want to be, and then everything is just given to you, basically. Like, you don't actually get to choose what you're doing. You're just saying, I'm an enhancement shaman, and that means I hit things, and I'm going to have to get dual weapons and all that. But that's a really shallow level for an RPG, because if you're looking at like Dungeons and Dragons, which these were all influenced from, those character creations got pretty deep, and every single level up, like, they were fairly linear, but you still got to make choices about what the character was. And not only that, but it's primarily about making choice and how you're acting in terms of, if you're talking about the tabletop, interacting with other players and how you're choosing to engage with scenarios, right?
Does your gear not count as choices, like your equipment? Because that seems to be where most of the sort of uniqueness and like numerical stuff comes in World of Warcraft, right? It's what you're equipped with?
Yeah, so I would definitely agree with that, but World of Warcraft also had a fairly linear progression in terms of how you gained gear. So you didn't necessarily get a choice, but this is one of those things as well. Choice is kind of a very Western RPG thing, because if you look at, like, RPGs that are typically made in Japan, like Final Fantasy and that sort of thing, choice is actually really limited in those as well. Like, they don't necessarily have a lot of choice in them. So RPG is one of those things where it's a constantly changing, redefined genre, and I think that's almost every genre except maybe FPS. Like,
it's almost like Japanese RPGs are kind of like the developer saying, this is my story, and Western RPGs, it's like, make your story.
Exactly, yeah. And that's...
With the term RPG, have we considered at all the actual words and what they mean, role-playing game?
Exactly.
Could an RPG just fall into a category of any game where you inhabit... I suppose that's any game, isn't it? Where you inhabit a character.
Then that becomes so broad as being meaningless.
That's true. Yeah,
Mario Brothers is
technically a role-playing game. Yeah, no, you're right. I was just trying to think of what RPG stood for originally when it came to things like Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe trying to find what the term was originally coined for would help.
I think it's from pen and paper, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think it originated
with D&D. That is a much bigger focus, because you are actually trying to act out the character yourself. Like, you're trying to put yourself immediately in their shoes and inhabit their mind space as well as the character mechanics, whereas it's a bit more abstract when we're talking about other video games, because you're right, you literally are just controlling whoever the protagonist or protagonists happen to be.
I think that relates beautifully back into what you just said, Matt, about there being choice, because when you inhabit a character, what's the point of doing that apart from having choices put in front of you and making choices?
Exactly.
Or deciding not to make a choice. So I think that is a really poignant point to make.
Yeah. Because, like, if you look at a lot of, like, first-person shooters, they quite often give you a choice: do you go left or right? But that's a fairly binary option. Whereas RPGs, I think, are typically meant to be more sweeping. Like, your decision to decide I'm going to put points into strength as my stat for now has a longer sweeping kind of effect. But not only that, it's typically very story-related dialogue options, which is why the line between adventure games and RPGs is kind of blurry. Whereas like modern adventure games have really become, we are going to deliver a story to you that you get to change based upon your choices, right? Whereas way back when, your classic text-based RPGs were basically adventure games with stats. That's basically how they burn down. Here's a linear story you're going to deliver to you, but you get to choose your character stats and how you deal with that. Or even a lot of them were like just these massive sweeping branching narratives that were kind of based off of the old exploratory adventure books, where you'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to make this decision. I'd have to turn to page 146 to see the outcome of that, right? Like, that's where those kind of all kind of sprouted from. But in terms of like how World of Warcraft worked, like, I think for me, the reason it ended up being more RPG than not wasn't because of the game mechanics, but because of the fact that it allowed me to interact with other people that I could actually roleplay with. So we were on a role-playing PvP server, and the guild that I helped run was a role-playing PvP guild called Ravencross. I'm shouting out to those guys. I'm pretty sure the guild actually still exists, and it's like 10 years old, if not older. But like that experience, like most of what World of Warcraft became for me, I didn't really care about the combat or the leveling up. It was actually playing out stories that I wanted to see with other characters that I could interact with, like actual human characters. So that's where the tabletop kind of adventure style thing comes into World of Warcraft, and why it kind of re-earns that RPG part of it.
So as far as choice goes, and mentioning World of Warcraft, just as a quick aside, I think we need to establish what the most important choice you may have made is. Horde or Alliance, man?
Horde. Horde all the way.
Yes! All right, we made the right choice. Excellent.
You can stay.
Yeah.
which
It's kind of a serious talking point at the moment if you look around the youth.
I was going to say, like, screw Sylvanas. I'm sorry. No,
Man, this is a topic for another day.
I know Hearthstone cards.
I have barely been paying attention to World of Warcraft, but I got genuinely upset at the fact that the Horde is looking to get another Garrosh-style character. Ugh. Anyway.
I think the greatest experience I've ever had in World of Warcraft is when I played with Christian for maybe a week, and we made characters, and one was a Forsaken called Daikovsky, and Christian had a Tauren called Beethoven, and that was running around as Daikovsky and Beethoven.
Daikovsky and Beethoven. That was glorious.
There's full-on like RPG servers for World of Warcraft too. Like they still operate to this day, where people don't worry about sort of leveling up the characters at all. They're just on there to sort of act out the roles that they play in the world, which is cool. So
yeah,
I agree. Just to touch on this RPG a topic, one of my best game experiences I've ever had, and it was quite a while ago. I think it was definitely over 10 years ago. It was back when we had a local friend.
Is this Neverwinter
Nights, and he was running a server called...
I was in there with you,
Were
baby.
You there? Yeah.
Awesome.
He was running a server called Chronicles of Torn, and he and his mates were sort of the DMs, and it was a full-on, like, fleshed-out world with a backstory and all sorts of lore, and you would log on, and there would be 20 other people in the game, and it was a role-playing experience, and it was amazing. And I remember it still being one of my favourite video gaming experiences was playing on that server. And I remember you used to have to create a character and write a backstory and then email it to the DMs, and they would approve it, and then you could log into the game and role-play that character. I just remember it being amazing. It was one of my favourite experiences.
Great.
Yeah, I just remember like the DMs would be, because Neverwinter Nights had a function where the DMs could award XP to you in the game. So you were actually awarded directly with XP for role-playing in the game. So I remember it being really thrilling, because unlike maybe World of Warcraft or City of Heroes, where I've done a little bit of minimal role-playing when you log onto a server, some would say it's not the focus and it's more of a game. Well, as I remember with that Neverwinter Nights server, logging on, and you rarely ever went off and killed anything. You just sat around role-playing and got experience for it, and I remember it being amazing.
In fact, they penalised people who tried to power level and treat it like a combat
I remember
game.
that,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, there was a dude that I remember, I can't remember if it was one of our immediate friends or not, but he sort of went about trying to kill a whole bunch of stuff to level up, and the people running the server sort of caught him in the act and said, this isn't the theme of what we're trying to achieve here. So they added a cursed fish to his inventory that basically over-encumbered him, and he couldn't get rid of it.
That's amazing.
That's
I
magic.
don't remember that, but that's great. That's fantastic. I remember all sorts of interesting things happening. Like I remember, like characters falling in love and getting married on that server, and people celebrating it in the forums that accompanied the game. It was just a really, it was one of the most intense role-playing experiences I've had outside of pen and paper D&D. I remember it just being really memorable, and I remember a whole bunch of our friends at the time all got involved, and we would, it was a real talking point whenever we caught up in real life. Yeah, it was really interesting.
So, Matt, what are some of your favourite RPGs other than World of Warcraft?
Okay. I wouldn't say World of Warcraft is one of my favourite RPGs. Just that it was the one where I engaged with it the most. And it kind of was like a gateway for me, getting into actual tabletop games. So I would say Mass Effect series is my favourite, and potentially unpopular opinion, 3 is my favourite.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, sure. No, that's fine. That's fine.
I really like 3 too.
Yeah, I like completely...
No, you said it right. I like 2.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. I'm with Christian. You're just flat out wrong. 2 is the better.
No, I love 2.
But it's okay. You're allowed to make a mistake. We'll forgive you.
I love 2, but 3 was the culmination of so many long-term choices that you
agree.
couldn't help but be like upset every single time you saw.
Relationships, right?
Yeah. Oh
Like
god.
it was all about. Yep. I'm there with you.
I just love how we no longer have to have this Which is better, Empire Strikes Back or New Hope. As soon as Phantom Menace came out, everybody just rallied together and hated on that together. So it's exactly
Like
the same with
Andromeda,
Mass
you mean?
Effect. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, for me, like my character in Mass Effect, like I remember playing through Mass Effect 1 and deciding from the get-go that I wasn't going to romance anybody, because like I met all the other characters. I'm like, none of these characters appeal to me. And then there was Tali, who wasn't an option. And I was like, oh, she's adorable. I love her. She's great. I'm just not going to choose anybody else. She's not an option, you know. And so it actually made for some really poignant cutscenes where normally you'd have your significant other coming in to help pick Shepard up, but he was having to pick himself up. And it really changed the context of those starting games for me. And then it just all culminates, you know, after 2, he doesn't get hooked up with anybody again. And then 3 rolls around, it's like, Tali's right there. It's an option. It's like, hell yes, let's do this.
Excellent.
And it's uncomplicated because you haven't gone and laid with somebody else in that whole time in the series. So it ended up being like a really sweet romance story as a result of that. But yeah, so I definitely love Mass Effect. I adore Fallout New Vegas. I think it is an excellent game. And
that's the correct answer when it comes to Fallout games.
And I'm also laying claim to Stellaris being an RPG.
I think that's entirely fair. I really do. There's a lot of content in that game now that picks up the narrative, for sure.
It has all the staples of what you would expect an RPG to have. It's just that on a larger scale, right? Like you're not talking about individual characters or a group of characters. You're talking about an entire galactic empire. But you're literally creating your own galactic empire. You're customizing how it looks. You're deciding what they're good at, what their stats are, and how they're built. And then you're playing the game and you're getting dialogue options to make choices about how they're going to interact with the universe. And so it's basically got everything that a major RPG would have that a lot of games that are defined as RPGs don't have. So I'm totally laying it down that Stellaris is a role-playing strategy game.
Totally fair.
Fair enough.
Nice.
Can we just address the biggest crime that's ever been made in video game history, and that you cannot romance Mordin in Mass Effect 2? I'm sorry, but I will never forgive Mass Effect 2 for not allowing me to.
Is that because, spoiler alert, like they don't want to set you up for a fall in Mass Effect 3?
No, it's because he sings Pirate of Penzance,
I was
for
going to
Christ's sake.
ask, is it because of the singing? Because that was
How could you not be in
adorable.
love with an amphibian scientist who sings musical theatre? My God, how could anyone pick anyone else?
I do think that was probably a result of BioWare still kind of testing the waters as to what their fan base would find acceptable. And then when Dragon Age Inquisition comes around and you can totally, be gay with a gigantic horned demon man, like they're totally cool with it, right? So I do think that BioWare was still kind of feeling that out. It's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit iffy about Anthem. I want it to be good, but I want some of that BioWare magic in there. So
yeah, ditto.
We'll see. All this conversation has made me realise I really need to get back to Divinity Original Sin 2 at some point.
Oh, that was high on my list when I said I was looking through my library to find games that I've played the most. Divinity was right up there, actually. I've clocked quite a few hours in Original Sin 2.
Yeah, my girlfriend and I actually were playing a co-op campaign, and Divinity is amazing with multiplayer because you can actually argue in dialogue, and it's hilarious. And it actually has kind of a competitive streak to it in terms of how the story is structured. That's spoilers, and I won't go too deep into it. But I've been we didn't actually finish that game, and I've really wanted to finish it because Divinity is amazing, and that's one of the other things I've been playing at the moment.
3 times with different groups.
It's the starting island is a pain. It is a real pain.
I've seen it 3 times. I think I've just made it off in one of them. It's frustrating.
It's the Divinity Hinterlands, essentially,
God.
for Dragon Age Inquisition fans. Yeah, that's crazy. No, we should. I mean, if we all felt compelled enough, we could do a co-op game with all of us in Divinity. I think is there a cap of?
I think it's 4.
4, or can we actually
it's
go?
4.
Oh, really?
I can watch and laugh.
That sucks.
It's fine.
4 plus DM though. We could probably do it that way. I'm sure that would work. Interesting. Yeah. All right, well, that's a whole bunch of roguelike and RPG talk. So we're running short on time, so I think we probably need to wrap it up there. But there are going to be ample opportunities to touch back on these topics in the months and weeks to come. So I'm looking forward to that. And we've got some good stuff coming out later this year that we might be able to circle back to as well. Like talking Fallout, we've got Fallout 76 coming up soon. Maybe we can find some role-playing opportunities in there while we're trying to nuke each other. Could be interesting. see how that plays out. But yeah, no, should be good. Well, anyway, thank you everybody for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I hope you have enjoyed our 2 new additions to the team. Well done, Adrian and Matt. Good start.
Yay! And now you fight to the death to see who stays.
No, I'll just roll over in the fetal position.
I knew I came armed for a reason.
I was not prepared for this kind of emotional torment.
That's awesome. All right. Well, yeah. So your progress will be wiped, Adrian, but you can commence another run whenever you're ready.
Nice. Yeah. Maybe I'll start with some sort of Uber weapon that I found in the previous podcast. So that'll be fine.
Yeah, that's it. Well, if we're going to declare Matt as the temporary victor, then Matt, you can kick us off by listing our contacts if people want to get hold of the show. Where do they go to get us?
So if you want to contact Party Loaded, you can email us at mail@partyloaded.com. You can go to our Facebook, Party Loaded. You can go to our Twitter, @Party Loaded Show. We've got a YouTube channel, YouTube.com/channel endgame. And we're on Twitch as well, on twitch.tv/partyloaded.
Nice. And Christian also is doing his misery stream at the moment.
I tried to get back into streaming this week, but my internet connection was playing up and it was a bit disappointing. So
man,
maybe
you've
next
had
week.
a bad week. You've had such a bad week. Yeah. That's it. Well, I don't know. Maybe we could organise some PvP stuff when we're trying out some funky decks and we want to do some test runs. That could be some fun.
Cool.
Organise something. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, we'll sign off now. We've got tons of stuff to play between now and next week. Thank you very much for listening. And from the 5 of us, I would like to wish everyone a good night. See you next week.
Have a good one.
Bye.
The Party Loaded podcast is a Channel Endgame production. For this and more great gaming content, bookmark channelendgame.com.